Hello everyone, and welcome. My first video to, see things out. And to begin, I am going to go over the historical figure that not many people actually know by the name of Alcibiades. Now, Alcibiades is not an influential figure by any means. He did not have a great impact on history, nor did he have a large role in any prominent figures' lives. However, I feel his story is very interesting and one that really should be talked about a bit more because, at least in my opinion, he is the most interesting person to have ever lived. Now, obviously, that's very debated with stories of Napoleon and other very famous figures, like Stalin. His story is very interesting, everything like that. But Alcibiades just captures my heart. So, I apologize for a brief overview. Alcibiades was born in Athens, and he was a statesman. Now, as the myth goes, Alcibiades was enragingly handsome. Like, the type of handsome where you walk out in the streets and fathers throw their daughters at you wanting you to marry them on the spot. That's how handsome Alcibiades was. Now, his looks weren't all that he had going for him. He was also very persuasive. This persuasiveness is what actually carried him through most of his life, but his good looks mixed with his idea of the human philosophy. He wasn't that smart, he didn't put it that way, but it's just how it ended up happening. He managed to persuade a number of people. So, to begin, he was a student of Socrates, I do believe. Yeah, so he was a student of Socrates, and that means he wasn't like some normal old Joe. So, he's not dumb, but he's not super smart. So, he managed to get on the Athenian council, which is not hard to do, since pretty much every male who lived in Athens was on it, but he rose to a prominent role as a statesperson. Now, in this role, he had a lot of influence, and like I said, as years pass, he's pretty, fathers throw their daughters at him. Not too certain what happened in those situations, there's not a whole lot of information there, but one day, Alcibiades gets very bored very quickly in Athens. Everything's very boring, it's all political, yada yada. So he advocated for an aggressive push. He was a major proponent in the push for the Sicilian expedition. Now, the Sicilian expedition, I am going to get into it right after I explain how it was set up. So, Athens, most of the statesmen were like, that's a really good idea, Alcibiades. Good job, handsome man. There was, I believe, one or two senators who said, that's a terrible idea. Why would you even think of such a thing? And they were pretty much thrown out because everyone likes Alcibiades. So, Athens amasses one of the largest fleets of ships the world had ever seen up to that point, or the known world had ever seen up to that point. Now, these ships, huge, they had transports, everything. So, they begin, and they set sail towards Sicily. Now, if you guys don't know, Sicily is an island south of Italy, and it was home to a kingdom called Syracuse. Syracuse is a Greek colony that gained independence, and was very prosperous because it controlled trade between the east, south, and west. Not a lot of trade coming from the north, really, because keep in mind, Rome wasn't, I believe, a huge thing at this time. Yeah, it was just a very minor thing, if it even existed at all at this point. I'm not exactly sure. You're going to have to fact check that one. But Alcibiades decided that that would be a perfect spot, because if Athens could reclaim that colony, they would become even wealthier than they already were. So they set sail towards Sicily. Halfway there, Alcibiades is called back to Athens for a supposed crime he committed. He was there on trial mostly. So halfway there, he is called back and he leaves back to Athens. Now let's talk about the Sicilian expedition and why it is known as a massive failure of the ancient world. So, if you guys don't know, Syracuse is not weak. Yes, they are a trade kingdom, but they are not stupid. They know their island. They know the keep in mind, a lot of tribes are still on the island. It's not like they own the entire island, However, they owned, like, the northeast, or, sorry, southeast of the island, mostly. So, in this proportion of events, the Greeks land on Sicily. I don't know exactly where they land, but all the Greek city-states did not speak one language. This is a very common misconception, because yes, Sparta and Athens, they could talk to each other. Many Greeks did speak the same language, however, you have languages from the Illyrian tribes, or the Thracian tribes, or even like northern Macedon, their tribes. All of these people come from all over Greece and all over the Mediterranean, for that fact, with slaves and everything like that, so there are a lot of different languages floating around, as well as a lot of different armor, because not everyone could, like, afford to be a hoplite, you know? So, this will come in handy a little later. So, the expedition, they all set up a camp for the night. And I don't recall how long they set up camp, but Syracuse knew they were being invaded, and so they thought smart. They did not leave their camps, or like their city, any of their camps, nothing. They sat and waited. One night, the Greeks decided it was time to go. And so, the armies all split up and they begin marching to besiege Syracuse. In the darkness, one of the armies is walking, and there's torches and everything, and then they notice another large army holding torches, speaking a different language, which they assumed was the Syracusans. Now, they were wearing different armor, they were marching not towards the army, but like towards the general direction of where the other armies might have been. They didn't really all know where each other were, it was very disorganized. So the army that spotted them went and they charged. When the armies collided, the army that was being attacked didn't know that these were also Greeks. They assumed that the Syracusans are attacking them. It's time for defensemen. So these two large armies are clashing, fighting, brawling together. While they are doing this, the Syracusans see them fighting. They know that they aren't fighting them, so they sneak around the armies fighting. They destroy every single landing ship that the Greeks brought, destroyed almost the entire fleet, and waited. After the Greeks finally realized they weren't fighting the Syracusans, they had already lost about a half of their numbers, and they decided, okay, we need to leave now. So they ran to their boats. The problem is, when all the boats are burned down, you don't have boats. So, when they went to get their boats, there was nothing there. The Syracusans now pressed them up against the coast and massacred every last Greek there. So the Sicilian expedition, total failure. Back to the topic of discussion, Mr. Alcibiades. There's a lot of debate over whether if he was there, he would have changed it, made it more organized, made it proper. I don't think so, because he wasn't a huge strategist, per se, but that's just an opinion. So, on his way back to Greece, Alcibiades didn't exactly want to be tried for a crime, exactly. So, on the way there, he fled to Sparta. Ah, yes, Sparta, land of the warriors, Leonidas. This is before Leonidas, after Leonidas, I'm sorry. Everything, like, Sparta, land of warriors, big strong men, big smart men. Alcibiades somehow, some way, managed to get an audience with the king of Sparta. He probably his good looks and, charm, as I said, so he became really good buds with the king of Sparta. So they were talking, best friends. He stays there for, I believe it ranged from a few months to a few years. However, one day, the king of Sparta discovered Alcibiades had slept with the queen of Sparta. Now that's a big no-no. If you go back to look at, like, the Iliad, Spartan kings don't exactly like when something happens to their wives. Like when Paris took, what's her name? When Paris took Helena, King Menelaus wasn't exactly the most excited about it. The same applies here. He was not very happy, and so he banished Alcibiades from Sparta. Now, Alcibiades was very, very sad. And this is, keep in mind, this is before Alexander. So there's still a lot of stuff happening. But that also means the Persian Empire is up for grabs. So, Alcibiades fled to Persia. In Persia, you guys will never guess who he befriended. Yes, the Persian Emperor, the big mighty man. Not Xerxes or literally anything related to Xerxes, but a big old man. And he made best buds with him. So, Alcibiades, little toxic towards the city-states of Greece now. He decided, you know what? I want Athens. He got a little, complex here. So he had Persia amass the second largest fleet the known world had ever seen at that time to go invade Athens. It was a wondrous success. He managed to take the ports of Athens, besiege the city. He basically owned Athens for a day. Yeah, 24 hours. After he had the city for that time, the returning navy. Now, when I said the Sicilians burned every ship, they couldn't get out to the ships in water, so the big, combat ships, like quintiremes and stuff, they couldn't get out to those. They just burned the transport ships so that the men couldn't get back to the fleet. So the fleet, seeing all the men die, returned to Greece. About this time, the fleet was returning. Now, when you have a massive fleet of warships, and you see another massive fleet of warships docked in a port, they see the burning flames, Athens under siege, and they go, we're gonna kill those guys. So they slam the Persian navy, absolutely massacre it. So Alcibiades fled Athens after he realized his army was basically dead. They kicked him out of Athens, and he fled to the north. There's not a lot of evidence on Alcibiades, so please keep it in mind, this comes from a few poems. There's not a huge lot. There's things like Kagan on the Peloponnesian War and Aristotle, the History of Animals, that kind of talks about Alcibiades. So it's all put together very loosely, a lot of it related to the Peloponnesian War, which would follow, shortly after. But there's a lot that happens. So he's mentioned briefly in some of them. And usually he is seen as a comedic relief type of thing. But Alcibiades fled to the north, and he fled to an inn-type place. Inns weren't popular, but it was a little hideout that he had. So he hid there. And up there, he led a rather peaceful life, funnily enough. So he sat up there, and he took refuge, and he actually had the aid of a king, but we don't really worry about that. All of that is a lot of, conflicting. But remember, this is just a theory since there's no definitive way that he died, but there is a big thing where, sorry, there's a thing where he hid in the north, or it was the east, it was one or the other, and he was hiding out. Assassins were sent after him, by the king of Sparta, who was still a little salty over him sleeping with either the queen or the mistress. They're the same thing to me. They're not, but shh. So the assassins came after him. Now, the assassins surrounded the building he was in. So Alcibiades was a little scared, so he grabbed a dagger, and he saw he had no chance to flee from the assassins who were there to kill him. So he rushed out, and he was going. He was actually about to set out for the Persian court to, get with the Persians again, but that didn't happen. So he went out with a dagger in hand, trying to go down fighting, before he was killed by a shower of arrows from the assassins. Alcibiades, the man who had persuaded the governments of Athens, Sparta, and the Persian Empire, the man who started the Sicilian expedition, slept with a high-ranking female of Sparta with relations to the king, impressing the Persian emperor himself, died by a huge volley of arrows from assassins. Alcibiades died at the age of 42. Now, he did not live a meager life. He did not live a boring life. Alcibiades lived a life of what I think is the closest thing to a D&D life anybody has ever lived, just because of how much bullshit he got up to. Now, I love the story of Alcibiades, mostly because of how wacky and crazy it is. But a lot of the stuff here comes from Wikipedia articles and some direct sources, so a lot of the facts I said here may not be entirely true. The general thesis of the story with the Sicilian expedition, Athens, Sparta, and Persia is all correct. I know that for a fact. There might be some small details that are tweaked a little bit that I'm not completely sure about, so please, in the comments, leave your thoughts on them. I would love to see if anybody knows anything about Alcibiades, because I remember a friend telling me the story a little bit ago, and I was so shocked that not more had been done by Alcibiades. Yes, they had old comedies and stuff about his beautifulness, but that's it. There wasn't anything like any big stories, novels, or anything about his adventures. So please, I encourage you guys, look him up. Learn about him. I think he's one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting man in history. So I want to thank you guys for being here. My first test run, my first video, covering my favorite man in history, the man, the myth. Not really a legend, Alcibiades. Thank you.